To the Batmobile. Let's go.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger. Ready to move out.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back one more time for another YouTube exclusive here on the Not Content Podcast, part of the From the Q podcasting network. My name is Jerome Cuson. We have spent the last 4 weeks releasing exclusive episodes talking about Batman Caped Crusader. This will be our fifth and final one, just like we did for X-Men 97. This was episodes 9 and 10, and we get to see a little bit of Harvey Dent as Two-Face. Probably one of the more gross versions of Two-Face. I would say that's one of the biggest positives about these final two episodes is just how disgusting Harvey Dent looks. And again, I think this is a character that just looks better in animation because you're not relying on CG or even goofy makeup to really get the idea of the character across. But we will be discussing The Killer Inside Me and Savage Knight. Both of which are heavily focused on the mob angle as well as Harvey Dent. And we get a little bit of payoff to the relationship between Batman and Alfred as well. We also get a Joker tease. But Brian, I want to start out by saying that when you really look at the kind of year that we're having in terms of animation, I mentioned Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles last week. I mentioned X-Men 97 and just all this that's going on. But you think about, the fact that we have, these three different iterations of Harley Quinn going on. Basically, this has kind of been a redeeming year for Gambit as well, between Deadpool and Wolverine as well as X-Men 97. But this might actually be our best opportunity to get a fresh look at Barbara Gordon and Renee Montoya. They might be two characters that feel like the most elevated, and if this were the equivalent of the NBA or the NFL most improved players, Barbara Gordon and Renee Montoya would certainly be at the top of the list because boy, do we get a great sense of who they are as characters. And as cool as it is to see this interpretation of Batman, the way that they have built up Barbara Gordon and Renee Montoya has been perhaps the part of the season that I've enjoyed the most.
Yeah, it's really nice that they switched it up with Gordon's age to allow this to happen, I think. Because if you make Gordon young, like we mentioned before, you're not going to get this Barbara Gordon at her mid-20s or whatever she's in right now. So that's the big change that I like about the ages in this show, because it allows these kind of like new relationships to develop. And, Montoya and Barbara Gordon have been kind of like side characters, almost used as like tools for the bad guys sometimes, right? Like Montoya was the traitor in the movies, and Barbara Gordon is always like known for being shot in the back by the Joker and becoming this victim. But in this case, they don't feel like victims at all. They feel like their own kind of fleshed out characters. A little bit of a romance tease between them, and maybe a three-way with Harley Quinn, who knows? But I like those little teases. It's a very adult kind of approach to it as well. And it's nice to see like their kind of point of view. It's almost like the audience point of view goes through them. So that makes a lot of sense. And I just like this new approach to it because, as cool as Gordon is, it's a nice switch of pace to the older Gordon like we had in Batman 66. So I like that kind of change of pace. And you got to see like a different side of Gordon as well, not this like, they mentioned it before, not this shades of gray kind of Gordon that we're used to that kind of plays into both sides and does what's best for the person or whatever, the criminal. In this case, he was very much a black and white kind of guy, and his daughter Barbara kind of contrasts that to kind of even the stakes a little bit, or even the scales a little bit when it comes to justice in terms of the cops in the show. So it's a nice change of pace. When it comes to Two-Face, the only thing I was disappointed with the face is that they didn't put a lot of coloring to it. They just added like a dark holes in his face. I kind of wanted to see it start rotting off a little bit, but they didn't push it that far. But still, like if you look at this in like a real life perspective, imagine a guy with just holes in his face all over the place. So that was a really interesting touch because usually live action you kind of see burn marks and stuff like that. But this case, with the animation, they just made it seem like they just burned holes right through his face and it's really disturbing. So that was really interesting. And then his hair got grayed out, so that was really cool in terms of like grayscale versus like the dark black kind of contrast, right? So that was a cool visual right there. So they set it up well. Um, I don't know if Bruce is to blame for setting off Two-Face, like he blames himself, but I feel like Two-Face was just going to go off anyway. So it's kind of weird that Bruce Wayne kind of harkens his blame for setting off Two-Face when in reality he just wanted to help the guy out. And that conversation they have at the restaurant, I feel like maybe Bruce is blaming himself too much and being too hard on himself. It just seems like he was just trying to help him, but it just set Two-Face off in this dark path all of a sudden. But I think Two-Face was on that path anyway. You know what I mean? Like he just wanted revenge anyway. He was plotting for how many weeks all alone in his apartment after the accident. So they very much took the Dark Knight route of like the last third act of the Dark Knight. It's kind of like this whole episode, The Killer Inside Me. But it's an interesting twist because at the end of that one, Harvey dies, but in this case, he stays alive for one more episode. But it was kind of like this retelling of the Dark Knight's last third act. So that was kind of cool, like a refreshing kind of tale, switch some things up a little bit. And yeah, it's just going to be interesting. We'll talk about it in the next episode, but maybe he's not dead after all at the end of episode 10.
I mean, no one's ever really gone, right? I mean, you think about it just this year. I mean, we have the announcement of Robert Downey Jr. returning to the MCU. We've already had Hugh Jackman back in the Marvel universe, so to speak. So, I mean, that's the thing about these characters is that, yeah, they're dead, but there's always the possibility of them coming back. I do have to say, I think we get our best Bruce Wayne scene in this episode. The scene where he takes Harvey Dent to dinner and Harvey slowly goes crazy and is just very paranoid, and we don't know whether people are saying stuff about him or not. I think that's really powerful, and I think it kind of, I'm not going to say justifies his behavior, but it gives you a direct reason beyond just like in the Dark Knight. It was very much they killed his girlfriend. Now he's quote unquote deformed, and now he's going to go off. But in this case, like he's out in the world and he's just becoming increasingly paranoid, and he's very concerned about his own well-being. And look, quite honestly, he wasn't probably mentally right anyway, given the conflicting feelings and the fact that he was kind of two-faced even before he became Two-Face. The other thing that I want to point out, and I really like this a lot, is that Two-Face does not use the coin. We do get a couple of teases of the coin flip, but we don't get an actual coin flip from Two-Face. And I like that they're kind of subverting that trope and not necessarily making Two-Face this kind of 50-50 decider. Like he is very conflicted, and he does straight up murder people in this episode. But ultimately, like you see him also trying to perhaps do the right thing and being convinced to do the right thing by Montoya, by Gordon, and by Bruce Wayne, and of course Batman.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it seems like Barbara Gordon, because she becomes his lawyer for all the things he does in the episode, just seems kind of like, I don't know, wild to me that she thinks that she can get him out of this. And I guess the idea is that he's going to name names, right? Because he's been the DA for like 10 years, and he's been prosecuting for 10 years, and he's got a lot of names and skeletons in the closet, so to speak. So I get the idea of her trying to get him out of it. I just feel like he was so deep in the hole, there was no way, and that's what Harvey was trying to tell her. Is like, I can't go back. Like I killed so many people. There's no way they're going to let me just name some names and get out of it. You know what I mean? Like I felt like Barbara was a little too naive, but you can't help her because she's trying to help her friend, right? So it's just kind of like this sense of desperation on the part of Barbara to like maintain Harvey and just try to protect them. And then the idea that they're being shot at an episode. I guess this leads to episode 10 now, where like Harvey's like being hunted down by Thorne, because Thorne, I guess, is worried that he's going to talk in jail and all these different things. Then he's worried that Harvey's still going to come after him. So there's this, because Harvey is he's dead set on killing Thorne. Thorne is the one that he offered the bribe to him. Harvey didn't take the bribe, and then they threw the acid in his face. So they got this whole thing going on now. And then it becomes like, they're hunting him down. And then, of course, this idea that Barbara handcuffs herself to Harvey Dent. I was just thinking, man, I don't know if that's such a good idea. But she was, you know what? Credit to Barbara, because she landed an amazing amount of headshots. I don't know if you noticed that, but she is a great shooter. And I think that's something they ought to maybe do in the movies. Like if they make Barbara Gordon this amazing like sniper. Did you notice how many headshots he nailed on the guys in the suits?
I mean, again, I think this is part of building up Barbara Gordon's competency. Like she is not just the daughter, like she's not just being used as like destined for Batgirl. Again, they have done such a great job, and I think that lends even more to what I was saying earlier. Just the fact that they've really identified her character and built her up. And I don't know, maybe this is something if Birds of Prey had been more successful, like would we have seen this version of Barbara Gordon? I mean, we definitely got a much improved version of Renee Montoya in that movie, but I really have to wonder, like, do we get a better version of Batgirl in a potential Birds of Prey sequel? But in this case, yeah, I mean, I think they did some really good stuff here, and just the moment where Harvey Dent is just kind of all over the place and seemingly ready to kill. You know, I know we mentioned Diedrich Bader as an important voice, an important part of the DC voice family, I guess. I have to say that in these two episodes, especially, like he really elevates his game. Like he's not just like the goofy Batman from Harley Quinn and Batman Brave and the Bold. Like he is actually like really showing a range of emotions here, and it's good stuff. It's why you bring in a voice actor and don't just bring in a random celebrity. And you know, I know Diedrich Bader has certainly done like live action stuff, so he's not totally inexperienced, but I mean, I think he really nails these two episodes especially, and I think it's kind of up and down, just the performance. You know, again, Harvey Dent is kind of we don't get enough time with Harvey Dent, and this is part of the issue. I think I think if this were 20 episodes and you got 10 episodes of Harvey Dent and then 10 more episodes of Two Face, I think this would just have worked out so much better because then I think the transition in the performance would seem so much more natural. But Diedrich Bader, I do think, nailed these final two episodes and nailed the tone really well.
Yeah, I think he did a great job. I just wish that the Two-Face voice was a little deeper, but that's my only criticism. But there were times when he was like becoming the unhinged side of Two-Face. You can hear it's like he's not doing the deep gravelly voice. He's doing the more like a Joker style, where it's kind of like he's mentally unhinged and raising his voice to high levels and just going crazy in public.
See,
So
I want to know if that was a note from the director, if that was a decision made by Bruce Timm and Matt Reeves and whatnot.
I'm thinking that too because we're so used to the deep voice that I wanted, right? So that's
I mean, because Batman, I mean, he doesn't really do the gravelly voice either. Like it's definitely deeper, but it's not bordering on parody levels. And if you think back to the Batman, like Robert Pattinson's voice is much more of a whisper. That also does not fall into the trap of being gravelly. So I wonder if they're making a conscious decision to get away from the cartoonish gravelly type voice.
Yeah, because to me it felt like this version of Harvey Dent would have been like a good character in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Do you follow me on that?
Yeah, I mean, there was much more of an emphasis on mental health, and I think you saw that with Harley Quinn, kind of being a therapist, and the way that they emphasized her character as being completely separate from the Joker. So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying, and
Yeah,
I
because
agree with you.
if you put him in like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, if you give him a growly, gravelly voice, that would have just changed the tone. But in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the reason I mentioned that movie because it's a really great representation of mental health, I feel, and what I've seen and reading about mental health, and that it's not always about like when you have like a split personality like Harvey Dent does. It's not like a total contrast of like people. Sometimes it could be just like a slight alteration in like a higher pitched voice, and that's where they kind of went with. So I was really impressed with that kind of change because, like I said, I wanted the deep growly voice, but they switched it up on me. And the fact that he gets shot in the belly made me think immediately, like, oh, there's no way he's getting out of this. He got shot in the belly. There's one thing if they show a scene of him getting shot in the arm or the leg, but once he got the belly shot, I was like, oh, he's gone. And then he gets shot in the back, and I was like, okay, he's gone. But the fact that it was only 2 episodes, we got Two-Face, really like, I don't know. It kind of rubbed me the wrong way because that's the one other criticism I have of like the Dark Knight is that we got Two-Face for too short a time. And I don't know if it's to satisfy this type of story or the story that they're trying to tell here on the show dictates the fact that he has to be only around for a few episodes and that's it. I don't know. but I felt like there's a lot more that they could have done. Like I said, if they kind of expanded this character, made him more like the Punisher, because in this case, he's more like the Punisher for
I
sure,
mean,
where he's
yeah,
just getting
I think
revenge.
Nolan was definitely trying to tell his story, and I could see where you're coming from, but I think in terms of Christopher Nolan, like his intention, at least on the surface, seems like he's going to do his 3 movies and then he's going to kind of step away. His job, I don't think he saw his job as I'm franchise building. I'm extending this so that this can be 10 movies. This is going to be kind of my version of it. And I think in that case, Harvey Dent needs to die because of the idea of like symbolism is so important in those Dark Knight movies and just the idea of what Harvey Dent symbolizes. So his death his death has a tragic element to it that I think works out. I'm not totally convinced that it's nearly as smart to just kill his character off in at the end of the season, even though I think there's still some great moments in the final 2 episodes. Just as I stated, the Harvey Dent scene in the restaurant I think is really good. I think the final scene on the dock where Batman threatens to kill one of the corrupt police officers, like I think that is a really good moment because you just don't see Batman hold a gun, and for him to hold a gun like that, it was definitely very powerful.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, what is he gonna do? Is he gonna shoot around his head? Because I've always had this visual, like, with Batman using a gun but scaring someone with it, and he did the exact thing that I was picturing, and shoot around his head. I don't know why I've had that visual for so long in my head of Batman with a gun, but not shooting a guy, but shooting around his head. And for some odd reason, they did it in this show. So when I watched this at, like, I don't know, like 12:30 at night the other night, I was just thinking, like, what the fuck? Are they reading my mind? Like, this is a visual I've had in my head for so long because it's a way for Batman to, like, poke fun of the guy and show, like, send the message that he doesn't like guns, which he clearly did in this instance, and that he threw the gun away. But man, I was thinking, like, how did they know this scene that I've been wanting for so long, and it's so random of a scene that I've been wanting in Batman? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. They just read my mind because that's the kind of image that I had in my head of, like, Batman scaring a criminal with their own gun, not even shooting him, but shooting around him just to scare him, showing that he has great aim, and then throwing the gun away, showing that he doesn't like guns. So I thought, okay, that was cool. That was a total Batman moment right there for me. Um, and despite what people think about the earlier episodes where he possibly killed those dudes with the Batmobile, I don't know, probably just broke the ribs. But I do like this idea that he's still sticking to the not killing thing. And clearly Barbara Gordon does not care because she gave headshots to a bunch of corrupt cops and some mobsters. So yeah, that was a cool little instance there where I noticed, like, Barbara's killing and Batman's not. So that's probably going to come. I mean, season 2. I feel like season 2 is already in the works because it just feels like something like this. You want to get as many episodes produced as
I mean,
possible,
I would
not
say
just 10.
with animation, you want to have 2 seasons in production at a time as opposed to one. Because I think of the best example is Invincible. Like they had a really fantastic first season that came out in 2021, and then we didn't get episodes until 2024. And again, I think you just have to. I'm going to speculate that we're going to get a season 2 next year, and we'll see what happens after that. But you really do have to do these 2 seasons at a time.
That's what I think too. Yeah.
That's why The Simpsons is always it is always renewed for 2 seasons at a time because you really have to prepare the episodes and have the animation and the voiceovers. So yeah, I'm really hopeful that we get a season 2 next year, just so we could follow up on this story because I think we're set up for more corruption. Just the system is not getting any better, but clearly Batman is softening a little bit. Like he calls Alfred by his first name, which feels like a big deal for their relationship. And that was definitely a great moment
And he
in a
threatened
show.
Thorne the most badass way, right? Like that was so.
I mean, literally an homage to Batman the Animated Series was that moment. Like there is no denying that that's what they were going for.
Absolutely, and it's frustrating, but it's like, oh man, because you want Thorne to, like, die, right? Because he's such an asshole and such a criminal for what he did, and the fact that he was using his kid, right, like as a pawn, even a pawn, like he was manipulating his kid to eventually join the family business, and I hate that about mobsters, man. Yeah, that's one of those things about mom movies that really, like, gets me and irks me, and I guess that helps with character development. But just the fact that you're manipulating your son to eventually join the family business in the way that the son was acting. You know what I'm saying? It was just like one of those, you know, rich people things, but from the perspective of a rich mobster kind of thing. And the kid was just like such an asshole. So that was a good little thing that they had right there with him and his son. But Thorn, I don't know. We'll see, because I think he's I don't think Batman's gonna kill him, but someone's gonna kill him, and then that's gonna lead to Batman trying to investigate who killed Thorn. Maybe that's kind of my theory. And then they're gonna be like, well, it's not obviously dead because Dent is dead. Wink, wink. And then, of course, Jerome has to throw out the name Ra's al Ghul, and I'm just thinking already, like, oh boy.
I mean,
So
you have a tease for the Joker at the end as well, so we have to address that. Joker
and
is
not
basically.
he doesn't seem associated with Harley, which is a cool change of pace, right?
I think that's a good thing. I don't. I mean, if they become associated, then it'll be as equals, which I think is a positive. But basically, Joker is doing the same thing where in that one episode where he's trying to like poison the water and turn everybody and have everybody laugh, and even the first movie, just basically that same plot line where he's going to force everybody to laugh to death. There is no indication on who the voice was. The voice is uncredited. I did look it up. They did not make that decision. Undoubtedly, I'm sure that this is going to be a huge conflict because of the great work that Mark Hamill's done. But I think Mark Hamill's basically said with Kevin Conroy dead, he will no longer voice the Joker, and that's totally fair. I totally get where he's coming from on that. But we will definitely have the Joker prominently featured in season 2, I have to believe. And I don't know, like, to me, it's almost become a trope in Batman now. Like, you don't do Joker in the first movie or season, but you tease him for the second. And I feel like at the end of Batman Begins, we get the tease of the Joker. In the Batman, we get the prison scene with the tease of the Joker. I almost would have preferred we just not tease the Joker. Like, again, the Joker is extremely popular, but we don't need to have the Joker in season 2. If you want, you could build it up even more and make it all the more effective. It just feels like this is what you do. You do the first season, you restrain yourself, but then season 2, it becomes all about the Joker. And I don't necessarily want the show to just be about the Joker again because it feels too easy. Like, we've seen the Batman Joker story told 1,000 different ways. I would just like for them to explore some new territory, and hopefully the way they interpret the Joker character, we do get that.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I mean, it's not a case where it is just 1 or 2 episodes of season 2. Like, I want him to be a presence. So maybe you're right. Maybe save it. But again, you're running the risk of not having a season 3. So I get why the writers probably set it up this way. It's just like with your rule of 2, right? The 2-season rule. So, well, based on that thinking, I'm like, okay, yeah, then the Joker's going to come and be like the dominant heel in season 2. But you would think that, but we hardly got Penguin coming back. So there's still Penguin out there. So there's a lot to play with in terms of like who's going to be the main villain for season 2, or they just spread it out. And then, of course, this idea that Dent might not be dead. I like this idea that someone kills Thorn and everyone thinks he's dead, but he can't be dead because he's dead. So there's your like twist to the story. That's kind of what I'm feeling based on especially the ending, and then this kind of threat that Batman does where he throws the batarang near his head at the end, and he's at the building across the way, and that's the homage to Batman in the animated series. But it just feels like that was a big setup for something in season 2. Like, you wouldn't just do that scene, because it makes it seem like Thorn is going to be a big part of season 2 now. Whether or not he's going to be a victim of a murder or something like that, I don't know. But it just feels like that Thorn character is going to be very important. So there's a lot of players on the table now, like a lot of pieces on the chessboard for season 2. So I'm just worried that it's not going to have a focus, but we'll see. I'm very optimistic, and considering that some of, like, I would say 1 or 2 episodes were a little bit of a miss for me in the season, but it just needed to be longer, and I think that's where Jerome nails it. It's just that, because after episode 10, I was thinking, like, man, I just feel like there's so much more to be told, especially in this everything they set up, and that the fact that Penguin didn't come back was kind of like a letdown. So we'll see where it goes. I want more of the Penguin coming back, and I want more of that English, UK mobster versus the Italian mobsters. I felt like that's what they were setting up, whether they noticed it or not in the first episode. Like, that's a really interesting premise to me, like the clash of different cultural mobs. So you never know, because Batman has like a world of different mobs and mafias, so they could go down that road in the future.
Yes, I would agree with all of that. I think there are a lot of different directions. I think the difference to me between X-Men 97 and this show is not all that dissimilar from the difference between the X-Men animated series from the 90s and Batman the animated series from the 90s. I think that Batman Caped Crusader is much more episodic. I think they are focusing on individual stories with a little bit more serialization. In this case, X-Men 97 is just complete serialization. Like we are starting in a very specific place with that show. The thing, and again, I don't necessarily know if it's fair to compare the two, but I think X-Men 97 was a better show just because I think the characters they had so many different directions that they could go in, and they really focused on the relationships. And with Batman, I think they did a much better job of building up different characters that are not Batman. But there were definitely episodes where I felt like there's something missing here, and I can't necessarily describe what that is for you. But I think it's just the idea of it's. I think part of the challenge of the Batman of any Batman series is that him interacting with people is always going to feel very stilted, just because the power dynamic is never equal. He's either in charge or he's against a villain or something of that sort. So I think it's tough. I think they did a very good job. This is still a very enjoyable show to watch, and I am definitely curious to see what direction they go in because again, they've done some really interesting things with the mythos, but they have a lot to prove. I, I just think they have a lot to prove in terms of what are they going to do with the Joker? What are they going to do with Harvey Dent? Are they going to bring him back? Are we going to introduce Ra's al Ghul? Like, how is this all going to play into it? And part of my thing about the the that dynamic is, it's just hard for me to visualize like how are they going to do Ra's al Ghul. I will say that the fact that we have had the two supernatural episodes definitely helps out, but I don't know. It feels like we might be going on a bridge too far. So we'll see how it ends, but still a very, very good season of television. I love the fact that all the episodes, just like X Men 97, were about 30 minutes. I think that's perfect in terms of telling the story. Again, my issue comes down to I wanted more episodes. I don't want longer episodes. I want more episodes so that you can tell your stories in 30 minutes and then move on to the next one.
Yeah, my only issue was like maybe colors. Like they went a little too dark and mute because like if you compare the '92 animated show, like the Harley Quinn costume is very bright red to mix with the black. And in this case, you really didn't get any like striking colors in terms of like the visuals or the costumes and stuff. Even the Catwoman costume, that was like that old school purple, right? So it didn't even pop on screen. So it seems like the colors in terms of the decisions for the colors of the show, it's like they didn't want the colors to pop at all. And I thought, it's all, difference in opinion and everything's subjective when it comes to art and colors and stuff. But for me, I'm more of like that Guardians of the Galaxy type style where you throw all the bright colors out as much as possible and make it a visual spectacle. So that's why I lean towards more X-Men 97 because they definitely went in that direction with all the powers and stuff like that. And the colors were amazing in all the episodes. But in this case, they just, went with the old school 40s look, which is fine. It's just I think they had some opportunities to use color better, like with Harvey Dent's face, or maybe even Harley Quinn's costume. It was a little too dark, maybe. But still, like I think
They
they have an
definitely go
opportunity
a
to fix
very,
things up.
very minimalist feel, which I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's both good and bad. Like I think in some cases, I think it works out really well, and in some cases, it doesn't. I mean, I think there is a consistency to the style that is very beneficial, but we'll have to see how this all develops. Any final thoughts?
I think they elevated the Bullock character a little bit. It seems like just to not make him a buffoon or
Feels
like
like
that.
it feels like when again, I keep harping on this, but it really feels like we needed more of those two. We almost needed an episode of those two just being corrupt. Like that's how it comes
Yeah,
across.
that was a nice change of pace too because Bullock got more screen time. Flash is like kind of a he's not a new character. He's from the comics. It's just
Right.
they need to
But
make it a partner for him.
we needed an episode focused on them, and we didn't get it.
Yeah, we got some of that when they let the fire dude out. That was some fucked up
That's
shit. But
closest, but even in that episode, it was much more focused on the police in general.
yeah, and it
As
was interesting to see
to
Bullock like get a focus. You know what I'm saying? Like he's just usually the guy eating food and getting yelling at Batman or something like that, and just get made a fool of. But in this case, they actually gave him like some evil doings, so to speak. He's straight up
I
evil in this.
think making him corrupt was a good decision because in the animated series, like he doesn't like Batman, but he's also a good cop, and it just feels like you do that on a kid show when you're doing something for adults. Though I think you could just straight up have him be corrupted. I think it works out really well, and it shows the
Yeah, I
Rock.
want this for the live action because they still haven't done this on the live action for Bullock. They made him in what '89 Batman, kind of the same as the 2005 version, right? So he doesn't always have to be the fat.
We don't
You know
even
what I'm saying?
have the '89 version. That's not Bullock. I don't know what he's.
Oh yeah, that's right. I keep forgetting that. That's not Bullock, even though he looks like Bullock. But it's the same premise. At least they changed it up a bit. And yeah, I was really impressed too because like that kick in the head that Two-Face gives him. You remember that in episode 10?
It's pretty
That
gnarly.
was like, pretty gnarly. Yeah.
Pretty gnarly violent moments in episode 10. I mean, even in a couple of other episodes. I mean, it's TV 14, so they could definitely go a little bit farther. And I'm sure being animation, they could probably go even a little bit farther than live action could with that TV 14 rating.
Yeah, so I would say like the best action stuff in the whole season was probably Moving Target, like I mentioned last week, because I think the action on that was great. Overall, my favorite episode, I don't know, it's kind of tough. It's kind of tied with some. Like Kiss the Catwoman is really good, and then that night, the Moving Target episode is maybe my favorite just because of the premise of it all. So there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of good writing, and I mentioned before, like they have a lot of good individual concepts for horror movies they use in this season, which could be easily expanded into its own horror movie that doesn't even need Batman. But you know, that's a discussion for another time in terms of horror movies and low budget movie making. But there were certainly some cool ideas in Nocturne, and well, the Gentleman Ghost stuff is kind of mixed bag, but that's very Scooby Doo-ish.
Episode 7 is probably my favorite just because I think they really showed how corrupt the cops are. But again, building up Montoya and Gordon, that is definitely my favorite episode. I would say the Ghost episode is probably the weakest of the 10. But again, I think they're definitely going for some different vibes than you might traditionally see in a Batman series. So those are our thoughts. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Make sure that you give a 4 or 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. If you would like to listen to podcast versions of our episodes, definitely do that. We have been going over some anniversaries, including Jim Carrey for the month of August. September, we're going in some very interesting directions, and we will be covering a lot of important anniversaries the rest of the year. Very excited for some announcements to come about the month of December. Especially Brian and I have been furiously negotiating how we are going to conduct the month of December because he definitely has a movie that he wants to review, and I definitely have a movie that I want to review. So we will keep you updated on those negotiations. For Brian, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again on the podcast feed and on YouTube next week.